The rain had started just after noon, a steady autumn downpour that turned the streets of Seattle into rivers of reflected light. By evening, it showed no signs of stopping. James Mitchell stood at the window of the Harbor Cafe, watching droplets race down the glass, and wondered for the 10th time why he'd agreed to this. A blind date? At 41 years old, with a demanding career and a 5-year-old daughter who needed him, he'd let his assistant convince him it was time to try again. "You can't spend every evening alone, James," Patricia had said with her characteristic blend of firmness and compassion. "Emma needs to see that it's okay to open your heart after loss." His late wife, Catherine, had been gone for 3 years now. The grief had dulled from sharp agony to a persistent ache, but the loneliness remained. Still, stepping back into dating felt overwhelming, almost disloyal, though he knew Catherine would have wanted him to move forward. He glanced at his watch. 7:15. His date was 15 minutes late. James checked his phone again, but there were no messages. He'd arrived early, anxious and uncertain, wanting to settle his nerves before she arrived. Now he was beginning to think she might not show up at all. Emma tugged on his hand. He'd had to bring her tonight, because his usual babysitter had canceled at the last minute. He'd texted his date to explain, half expecting her to cancel, but she'd responded with a simple, "No problem at all." "See you soon." "Daddy, I'm hungry," Emma said, her curly red hair bouncing as she looked up at him with wide hazel eyes. She wore her favorite pink dress, the one with the little flowers, because she'd insisted on looking fancy when James told her they were meeting. "Someone special." "I know, sweetheart." "Just a few more minutes," James said, though his confidence was waning. By 7:30, the truth was becoming clear. She wasn't coming. James felt a familiar heaviness settle over him. Not anger, exactly. Just a weary disappointment that confirmed what part of him had believed all along. It was too complicated. He was too complicated. A widower with a young child, running a major tech company, with barely enough hours in the day to manage everything he already had on his plate. "Come on, Emma," he said quietly, taking her hand. "Let's get you some dinner and head home." They were halfway to the door when a voice called out behind them. "Wait, please don't leave." James turned. A woman stood near their table, slightly breathless, her blonde hair darkened by rain and clinging to her face. She wore a simple white blouse and navy pants, now damp from the weather. Her blue eyes were anxious but kind, and there was something genuine in her expression that made James pause. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said, hurrying toward them. "I'm Claire. Claire Anderson. I got caught at work, and then there was an accident on the highway, and my phone died so I couldn't text, and..." She trailed off, clearly flustered. "I know I'm terrible. 45 minutes late is inexcusable, and you have every right to leave, but please don't." "You're the only one who came?" James blinked, confused. "What do you mean, the only one who came?" Claire's cheeks flushed slightly. "This isn't my first attempt at a blind date this month. I've been stood up 3 times, so when I saw you heading for the door..." She took a breath. "I really am sorry. And I completely understand if you want to leave, but I'd really like a chance to start over if you're willing." There was something disarming about her honesty, her vulnerability. James found himself studying her more closely. She wasn't trying to make excuses or minimize her lateness. She was just being honest, showing him the reality of her situation. It was refreshing. Emma tugged on his hand again, looking up at Claire with open curiosity. "Are you Daddy's date?" she asked with the straightforward bluntness that only 5-year-olds possess. Claire's expression softened as she looked down at Emma. "I hope so," she said gently. "If your daddy is willing to forgive me for being so late." James felt his resistance crumbling. He looked at Emma's expectant face, then back at Claire's hopeful expression. Maybe Catherine was right. Maybe it was time to take a chance. "All right," he said, managing a small smile. "Let's start over. I'm James Mitchell, and this is my daughter, Emma." Claire's whole face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "Thank you so much. I promise I'll make it worth your while." They returned to the table, and Claire excused herself briefly to dry off a bit in the restroom. When she returned, looking slightly more composed, though still damp, they ordered dinner. Emma requested chicken fingers with extra enthusiasm, and Claire asked her several questions about her favorite foods, her school, and her toys with genuine interest. "So," James said once they'd settled in, "you mentioned this wasn't your first blind date recently. I take it the others didn't go well." Claire laughed, but there was a hint of embarrassment in it. "That's an understatement." "The first guy took one look at me, said I wasn't what he expected, and left before we even sat down. The second never showed up at all. The third arrived, took a phone call, and then claimed he had an emergency at work. I saw him later that evening at a bar across the street." "I'm sorry," James said, and meant it. "That's rough." "It is what it is," Claire said with a shrug, though her eyes held old hurt. "Dating in your 30s as a single woman isn't always easy. Add in a demanding job and some bad luck, and here we are." "What do you do?" James asked. "I'm a social worker," Claire said. "I work with families in crisis, mostly dealing with child welfare cases. It's difficult work, emotionally exhausting, but it matters. These kids need someone fighting for them." James felt a surge of respect for her. "That sounds incredibly important." "And incredibly hard." "It is," Claire admitted. "I often work late, dealing with emergencies. That's what happened tonight, actually. We had a situation where a child needed immediate placement, and I had to stay until we found a safe home for her. By the time I finished the paperwork and got on the road—" She trailed off apologetically. "You were saving a child," James said quietly. "That's not a small thing." "Thank you for understanding," Claire said, her expression grateful. "Not everyone does. My last boyfriend couldn't handle the unpredictable schedule, the emotional toll. He said I cared more about other people's children than about building our relationship." There was pain in her voice, and James recognized it. The pain of someone who'd been criticized for their dedication, their compassion. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think what you do is admirable. The world needs people like you." Emma had been listening quietly, swinging her legs under her chair. Now she spoke up. "My mommy died," she announced matter-of-factly. "She got sick and then she went to heaven." James felt his chest tighten. Emma's direct way of stating facts sometimes caught him off guard, though he'd learned not to discourage her from talking about Catherine. Claire's expression shifted to one of gentle compassion. She didn't offer empty platitudes or uncomfortable sympathy. Instead, she reached across the table and gently touched Emma's hand. "That must have been very hard," Claire said softly. "I bet you miss her very much." Emma nodded seriously. "I do, but Daddy says she's always in my heart, so she's never really gone." "Your daddy is very wise," Claire said, glancing at James with understanding in her eyes. Their food arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Claire told funny stories about her work, carefully avoiding anything too heavy or inappropriate for Emma's ears. She talked about the elderly woman who called her office, every week convinced that aliens were trying to steal her cat, and the teenage boy who'd started a community garden to help. Other kids in foster care feel more grounded. James found himself relaxing, laughing more than he had in months. Claire had an easy warmth to her, a way of making even difficult subjects feel manageable. She engaged with Emma like a natural, asking her opinion on important matters, like whether chocolate or vanilla ice cream was superior, and listening to Emma's rambling stories about her kindergarten class with genuine attention. "What about you?" Claire asked eventually, turning her focus back to James. "What do you do?" "I work in tech," James said, deliberately vague. He'd learned over the years that leading with "I'm a CEO" often changed how people interacted with him. Software development, cloud infrastructure, that kind of thing. "That sounds fascinating," Claire said, and seemed to mean it. "I have to admit I'm not very tech-savvy. I barely understand how my own computer works half the time." "That's all right," James said with a smile. "I barely understand child welfare systems, so we're even." As the evening wore on, James found himself genuinely enjoying Claire's company. She was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught him by surprise. She was also remarkably patient with Emma, who was starting to get tired and restless as bedtime approached. "I should probably get her home," James said reluctantly, glancing at his watch. It was nearly 9 o'clock. "She's usually in bed by 8:30. "Of course," Claire said, though James thought he detected disappointment in her voice. "I understand completely." They stood to leave, and James helped Emma into her jacket. As they headed for the door, Claire walked with them. Outside, the rain had softened to a light drizzle. The streetlights cast golden pools on the wet pavement, and the air smelled clean and fresh. "Thank you," Claire said, turning to face James, "for giving me a chance despite my terrible timing, for staying even though you had every reason to leave. Tonight meant more to me than you probably realize." "I'm glad I stayed," James said honestly. "Despite the rocky start, this was nice, really nice." "Daddy," Emma said, tugging on his hand with renewed energy despite her earlier tiredness. "Can Miss Claire come over sometime?" "I want to show her my dollhouse." James felt his face warm, but Claire just smiled warmly at Emma. "I would love to see your dollhouse," she said. "If your daddy says it's okay?" James met Claire's eyes and saw hope there, mixed with uncertainty. He made a decision. "How about lunch this weekend?" he suggested. "You could come to our house. Emma can show you her toys and I'll cook. I'm told I make a decent pasta." "That sounds wonderful," Claire said, her smile genuine and bright. "I'd really like that." They exchanged phone numbers and James promised to text her the details. As he and Emma walked to their car, Emma chattered happily about Miss Claire and all the things she wanted to show her. "Did you like her, Daddy?" Emma asked as James buckled her into her car seat. "I did," James admitted. "I liked her very much." "Me too," Emma said with satisfaction. "She's nice, and she didn't get weird when I talked about Mommy." That observation struck James deeply. Emma was right. Claire had handled the mention of Catherine with grace and compassion, neither dismissing it nor making it awkward. That spoke to a maturity and emotional intelligence that James deeply appreciated. As he drove home through the rain-slicked streets, James felt something he hadn't felt in years: anticipation. Not just for the upcoming lunch, though he was looking forward to that, but anticipation for what might be possible, for the chance to open his heart again, to build something new without forgetting what he'd had before. That weekend, Claire arrived at their house bearing flowers and a children's book about a brave little girl and her adventures. Emma was delighted with both the gift and the visitor, immediately dragging Claire upstairs to see her room. James watched them go, hearing Emma's excited chatter and Claire's warm responses, and felt a sense of rightness settle over him. He'd been so focused on protecting himself and Emma from more hurt that he'd forgotten something important. Love wasn't just about loss. It was also about hope, about new beginnings, about taking chances even when you were scared. As he prepared lunch, he could hear laughter from upstairs. Emma's high-pitched giggles and Claire's lower, genuine laugh blending together in a sound that filled the house with warmth. Maybe, he thought, this was what moving forward looked like. Not forgetting Catherine or the love they'd shared, but making room for new love alongside the old. Not replacing what was lost, but building something different and equally precious. When Claire and Emma came downstairs, Emma was holding Claire's hand and talking animatedly about her stuffed animals. Claire caught James's eye and smiled, and in that moment he knew he'd made the right choice. By staying at that restaurant, by giving her a chance, by opening himself to possibility. The weeks that followed brought more dinners, more conversations, more time spent together as Claire gradually became a regular presence in their lives. She fit naturally into their routine, never pushing too hard but always present when invited. She attended Emma's school play, bringing flowers and cheering enthusiastically. She joined them for weekend hikes, matching her pace to Emma's short legs and pointing out interesting plants and animals along the way. James found himself falling for her slowly, steadily. Not the intense, overwhelming passion of his 20s, but something deeper and more sustainable. A partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. Claire never tried to replace Catherine in Emma's life. Instead, she carved out her own space, becoming someone Emma could trust and rely on in her own right. She attended parent-teacher conferences with James when her schedule allowed, helped Emma with art projects, and listened patiently to endless stories about kindergarten drama. One evening, about 3 months into their relationship, James and Claire sat on his back porch while Emma played in the yard. The summer sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Can I tell you something?" Claire said, her voice quiet. "Always," James replied, taking her hand. "That night at the restaurant when I was so late, I almost didn't come at all," Claire admitted. I was sitting in my car, exhausted from work, soaking wet from the rain, and I thought, why bother? He's probably already left, and even if he hasn't, why would he want to deal with someone whose life is this complicated? She paused, her eyes on the horizon. But then I thought about those other dates, about being stood up and dismissed, and I decided I had to at least try. I had to show up even if it was late, even if I was a mess. Because maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who would understand. Who would be willing to look past the surface complications and see me? James squeezed her hand gently. I'm glad you came. I'm glad you asked me to stay. So am I, Claire said softly. More than you know. That moment when you turned around, when you decided to give me a chance despite everything, it changed my life. It changed mine too, James said honestly. I'd been going through the motions for so long, just surviving day to day. Emma and work, that was my whole world. But you reminded me that there's more to life than just getting through it. You reminded me that it's okay to want companionship, to build something new. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Emma chase fireflies in the fading light. James thought about that rainy evening months ago, about how close he'd come to walking out that door, how different his life would be now if he had. Emma asked me something yesterday, Claire said eventually. Oh? James prompted. She asked if I was going to be her new mommy, Claire said carefully. I told her that nobody could replace her mommy, but that I loved her very much and hoped to be part of her family in my own way. I hoped that was okay. James felt his throat tighten with emotion. That was perfect. What did she say? She said that was good, because she wanted two mommies, one in heaven and one here. Claire replied, her voice thick. She's an amazing kid, James. You've done such a good job with her. Catherine did most of the hard work, James said quietly. I'm just trying to honor what she started. You're doing more than that, Claire said firmly. You're raising a kind, confident, emotionally healthy child despite incredible loss. That takes more than just following instructions. That takes love and dedication and constant presence. Later that evening, after Emma was in bed, James and Claire sat together in his living room. The house was quiet, peaceful. Rain had started again, a gentle summer storm that tapped softly against the windows. I've been thinking about something, James said carefully. About us, about the future. Claire looked at him attentively, waiting. I'm not good at taking things slow, James admitted. With Catherine, I knew within weeks that I wanted to marry her. And with you, I know it's only been a few months, but I already can't imagine my life without you in it. He took a breath, organizing his thoughts. I'm not asking you to marry me right now, but I want you to know that's where I see this going. That's what I'm hoping for if you want it too. I want to build a life with you. I want Emma to have you as a constant presence, not just someone who visits sometimes. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Claire's eyes were bright with tears. I want that too, she said softly. I want all of that. And yes, it's fast. But when you've both been through what we've been through, the loss, the disappointment, the loneliness, you learn not to waste time when you find something real. James pulled her close, and they sat together in the quiet of his living room, holding each other while the rain fell outside. Two people who'd almost missed each other, who'd come so close to walking away.